Oh yeah, because one thing with Israel is not only that it's shown like how willing it is to kind of commit militarily, but it's also the type of ways it goes about it. So um, I think it was Bigadi who mentioned on a few open mics ago pertaining to the decapitation strikes, and that it's kind of a faux pas. Now it's a faux pas when you have it between states, but when you have a paramilitary organization such as Hezbollah and Hamas, it kind of doesn't apply. The faux pas is maybe striking over in Qatari territory, but then their faux pas again is holding the Hamas in the first place, because Hamas becomes like in international law terms, it becomes almost the equivalent of mercenaries. They automatically fall in a gray zone one way or the other when it comes to these kind of relations. However, when you look at the Islamic Republic, now here we have a state generally recognized and whatnot, and during the 12-day operation, I don't think they did that much actual political liquidation. It was still IRCG commanders and such like that, but they were making like fairly clear threats that they were considering taking out the Ayatollah and whatnot. Now, well, that may be a faux pas. I think that's a good faux pas, because I think leaders who are like want to push the population into war or something, like, I mean, in the good old days, like leaders, they used to actually be in the front of the armies. So I think if leaders want to have like want to go to war and whatever, they should have a real stake in it. It goes both ways. Like, if the Israelis are starting to do political liquidations with the Islamic Republic, the only thing stopping the Islamic Republic is their ability to reciprocate, right? But I think that's like, maybe that should be by international law standards, like a prerequisite that you have to make at least for this much effort proportionate to your GDP, you should at least have one politician or something like that. Heck, I'm pretty sure I would probably be okay with that Norway in war with someone if we need to clean house a little bit. So if we can get that law in there where the politicians and the leaders are actually valid targets, oh shit, I just realized that I just ranted on a pro-war argument. That was kind of hush hush. Let's not tell anyone.
And you encourage assassination of politicians.
Now I understand. Now I understand why not to take out the leaders, because the population.
Give that man a cookie.
Really okay with
but it's okay. It's okay. It's okay, Coping, because you said it in favor of Israel, so you're protected diplomatically there.
It's not necessarily in favor of Israel, because if they come in, let's say Turkey, I'm pretty sure Turkey is at least as capable, if not, I would say more capable probably than this.
Oh yeah, because in that case, like in the case that you're making, well, Hamas, has been designated a terrorist organization, but that's just on account of the imbalance of diplomatic power, because it is also an elected institution of like artificially non-state or artificial state, whatever you want to call it. The thing about the attacking leadership and decapitation strikes or attacking negotiators is not that you're attacking protected people, that it's morally wrong to do that. The problem with that in terms of like laws of war is the impossibility to negotiate creates situations of absolute brutality. Like you can only have total war and even in situations of total war, like in the Second World War, there was still a protection of diplomatic relations, because you need to be able to negotiate with the other side if there's going to be any settlement that is not total annihilation. So that is the reason for protecting.
But on that World War II, they did try to assassinate Hitler, but they at least considered it. But one of the judgments for not doing it, because again, why would you take out Putin, for example, when the next one in line may actually be more competent? And this is, of course, a valid argument for like why decapitation strikes. Like, and it's a valid point as well. Like, if you start having that as a normative way of conducting war, then of course negotiations are going to be difficult, because before you know it, the one you're negotiating with is dead and you're going to have a change of position. But that's also why it may be favorable. If you consider Hezbollah, right? So Israel had taken out Fard Shukr, which the Americans had not been able to for like decades. And they took out all the chain of command below that. But Hezbollah was still not going to relent. When on Hassan Nasrallah's latest speech, he said there was no change on the stance of Hezbollah. There would be no negotiation of a ceasefire with Israel unless there was a separate ceasefire with Hamas. And that's kind of like, if you're looking at it in hindsight, it could kind of be like the cue for the Israelis that, okay, at this point now, we are on the point of being clearly militarily defeating them. but they're still being doggedly fighting, and we don't want to fight anymore. They're not a state actor, so the diplomatic fallout is not big of taking out a so-called political leader. It is technically like political liquidation, right? So what happened here? When they took out Hassan Nasrallah, 4 days later they took his successor. His successor can be assumed to be close to him, or like a right-hand hand or something. Like, he's likely to have a very similar stance and way of going about it. But when he was taken out, Hassan Nasrallah's son, for example, who was also requested to come to take position, he just, oh no, I want to move away from politics and dedicate my life to religious studies. Like, very telling. And then there was a lot of hesitation before the new leadership for Hezbollah came in. But when the third person did come in, oh, lo and behold, we have negotiated actually a ceasefire, irregardless of the precondition of a separate ceasefire with Hamas. Not only that, we accepted disarmament and withdrawal, which is not a ceasefire, it's a surrender, right? And still but of course they played it for their own party, like they were, waving their flags, like declaring victory in the rubbles, right? Which is kind of like bizarre. Like, you'd understand it if it was, for example, Hamas eventually, because Hamas simply needs to prevail here. But Hezbollah actually accepted terms which Hamas will not. This is why I don't think the peace plan would work, because it's not a deal they can actually accept withdrawing, right? But Hezbollah technically did, which is one of the reasons, like the ceasefire is very much not only just a ceasefire because it's more like a surrender, but because Hezbollah cannot, for political reasons, it will be political suicide actually to now surrender, like to withdraw and disarm, because it's in their charter, right? The reason to exist is to destroy Israel. So you can't actually, from a political standpoint, yield on that point. So that goes back then to the decapitation strikes. If Hassan Nasrallah was so doggedly, then what actually changed within a few weeks was just the leadership. And so in the right circumstances, maybe decapitation strikes are the way to go. For example, in the case of the Islamic Republic of Iran, that is rather doubtful, because the Ayatollah has accrued quite a lot of hatred, people really dislike him. He went from a hero 40 years ago, and now he's like, all the internal issues going on in Iran, they have been mounting very severely. So Israel might just simply conclude that, okay, but wait, if we take him out, then actually like a new fresh face that can stabilize the situation may come into play. Maybe it may actually be just better to just let this come to like a boiling point. Like, either they take him out themselves, or when we do, it's because we are anyways going to make another move or something like that. And the
more he hides, the more cowardice he looks to the population as well. So
yeah, and he has been mostly, even though the 12-day war or whatever is over, like, he has been most of the time in the bunker. He's barely come out, and when he's had speeches, like I saw one of the latest one, he was standing at the doorway. He didn't even dare to go up on the podium out of fear of getting assassinated. Clearly that would be the reason. Like, you saw, he was bulked up in bulletproof vest, standing with the mic in his hand at the doorway not for like an hour or two like he usually would, just like a bare like 10 minutes or something like that, and then just kind of hurry away.
There must be some kind of a serious psychological impact on him then, because Israel constantly threatened to kill him, but I don't think Israel actually wanted to kill him.
And they took next in command, right? They showed that they were willing to take high command and from the beginning, and even if they were political. And it's not clear yet whether, for example, remember several months ago, like when I mentioned the scores of assassinations that were occurring across Iran, and they were kind of unconventional compared to what Israel tends to do. But there were some targets which were very telling, because these were two top Irish, like not top, but they were so far top that they would be very important for those internally in the country, but not so much for Israel. It doesn't really qualify as their target, right? So they kind of showed already, like, no, they took out Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, right? As soon as he came to Tehran, that was when they're permitted to take him out. When they could, of course, have struck him in Qatar, like they did recently, right? But they choose to do it in Islamic Republic of Iran, which gives a pretty good signal at the same time. Yeah, we will take the leader of our enemy because he entered your lands. What do you think we're going to do to you if we feel like it, right? Like the way Israel was operating with the Islamic Republic is very unconventional. Like, when you think about like Bigali had been mentioning earlier, it's sort of like a gentleman agreement that you don't go after the leaders. But Israel just went full on mafia. They're just like calling them as like, yeah, I'm calling from a country that just 1 to 2 hours ago took out your colleagues, and you have about 12 hours to film yourself surrendering and relinquishing any support for the Islamic Republic. If not, if you care of your family, and because this is the thing, right? Also, they said, we'll take your family too. Typical mafia activity, right? We'll take your wife, your children. If you care for their lives, you should surrender, you should surrender, right? Basically, and this is very effective, right? Because they were forced, in the terms of their surrender, personal surrender, relinquishing from the state, they would film themselves doing so. That we would not be fighting for the Islamic Republic. So that goes back to one of the things that the Israelis have stated many, many times, that this is what they want to do. And this makes sense because their geographical distance means that they cannot kinetically really take out the Islamic Republic. So their stated objective, regime change. Yo, Nika. And so you can see that's clearly what they have been aiming
Hey,
for. That
guys.
probably explains why they don't take the Ayatollah. Because if the Ayatollah has accrued a lot of unpopularity, right, then maybe he can, they don't really necessarily have to have too much of a hand on it, even though everyone knows this is what Israel wants, because Israel has already stated it. So, yeah.
But I think it does show something, that conflict with Iran, where they kill off so many people, try to create all this propaganda about how the Shah is going to encourage the people to revolt in Iran. It does show something. It shows that Israel actually do not have allies on the ground. I think this is what it shows, because that would be a perfect opportunity for a revolution, right? And if you don't do a revolution at that moment, where you have all this strong propaganda or situation that is happening with all the airstrikes, and people dying, and all these top leaders dying, and there's no revolution, then that means they actually do not have the ground elements to actually help them.
I think they must have support, but your point is still correct. I would say that they didn't have enough, because then that would actually be, like you said, it would have cost it. But they clearly must have, because you don't pull off assassinations like with Ismail Haniyeh and stuff like that without having pretty good, well-established and expensive espionage infrastructure. So however, if you think about these judges again, because it stands out in so many ways, that it's sort of might be a favor that let's take Ismail Haniyeh. Now I'm just speculating, but let's take Ismail Haniyeh. Maybe the Israelis asked for favors to get him taken out, because he's not actually of interest for the dissidents. And so what they wanted in return, okay, we know that these judges don't usually qualify, but do take them out for us, and as a return of the favor. And then when it comes down to so what will be the next mutually aligned favor here, if it's not detached from each other, but they're coming concomitantly, that would be that the Israelis would be actually striking the internal security forces, because it's not like the Islamic Republic didn't have any way to stop any form of uprising. There are protests going on now because of the water crisis and so forth. So it's but they clearly have an internal security mechanism that is still withstanding. So if the Israelis are making that, let's say there's a next round where they're going to have a 12-day operation or something like that, then them targeting the internal security services and it being concomitant, so at the same time as the population is rising up, then that would suggest that it's not just merely internal issues in the Islamic Republic, but actually also external interference. So Desi.
I kind of agree with you in some points, disagree with you in some points, right? Surely, the decapitation strikes in Lebanon was a complete success for Israel. The decapitation strikes of the lower ranking officials in Iran was also a huge propaganda victory and a loss for Iran. But these are just strategic stalemates, right? This doesn't improve the situation of Israel. Secondly, in terms of local revolution, Israel doesn't want that. They have learned this lesson from the Arab Spring, because if there is a revolution, even say in a hostile nation like Iran or Lebanon, revolutionary governments are very hard to control, right? Unless they are completely, packaged and, created like the HTS, right? These, and even the HTS, they are an unreliable ally for Israel. Israel doesn't want chaos. They want to prop up catered leaders. That's why the Shah came in. Any kind of revolution, whether in any of these Middle Eastern countries, whether it's Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, anywhere, right? What are they gonna seek? the first thing the revolutionary government is going to seek is legitimacy, right, amongst its own population. Now, if it's a devastated place like Syria or Lebanon, or a very small country like Lebanon or Yemen, then you can have some Western-backed prop and Western support acting as sufficient legitimacy. But if it's a large nation like Iraq, Saudi Arabia, or Iran, then the local regime will need to appease its own population before, seeking Western legitimacy. And a very good way to do that is to start spewing, anti-Israel rhetoric, at least, at the minimum. So I do not think Israel really wants revolutions around itself. That we already saw what happened in the Arab Spring 10 years ago, and it wasn't really favorable. Like,
Right.
some of the things.
Just one thing on that, because it's true, but none of those countries in the Arab Spring, barring except for Syria, posed any sort of nearly as comparable threat as the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic, unlike any other, they had actually quite a lot of power, right? Like, they militarily speaking were capable of I mean, they were the only ones actually able to overwhelm the air defenses of Israel, right? So, like, I think it's kind of like a different thing, because if the Islamic Republic is considered like an immutable enemy, then making a regime change there might be favorable. Because if you think about, for example, al-Sharaa in Syria compared to Assad was, reliable in a sense. The armistice had been lasting for 50 years. The Syrians, there wouldn't have been too many issues really there have been hits and strikes across the border. Right?
I kind of disagree. Because, disorganized terrorist organizations are much easier to deal with, even if they can periodically get the weaponry to breach Israeli airspace or whatever. They are disorganized. They are illegitimate. They do not have local support. In comparison, the Assad regime, or more importantly, the Muslim Brotherhood, government that came into Egypt, that poses a way more dangerous long-term threat to Israel, right? I say sure. In the short run, they can be, very scary. That's all.
Can I add one comment? Just one comment.
Yeah.
One comment. Yeah. Actually, after the revolution, there was a war on Gaza. And the only leadership that could stand against Israel and stop the war is the Islamic Brotherhood in Egypt. So that's very important thing. Go.